My name is Shruti and I run like a part-time small crochet business and I sell plushies and patterns. And I thought it'd be really fun to walk you through how I started and if you want to get started, some tips and tricks for you as well. So starting at the beginning, I started crocheting with very much the intention of it just being a hobby. And I actually wanted to just make some tops for myself. So in honor of that, I'm actually wearing one of the tops that I made. And I think I made around 3 or 4 of them. And at that point, I wanted to make a gift, and it was actually this little baby Yoda. And I wanted to make this, and I had no idea about how to do amigurumi, working rounds, anything like that. So I followed a YouTube video, like very, very thoroughly, step by step, and had to redo multiple of the parts. And I talked about that a little bit in the last video, so I won't go more in depth. But yeah, this was my first one, and I was obsessed with how it turned out. It was so cute. And then I went on a journey from there. I made him a couple other items like a Mandalorian and then like a mini version of this baby Yoda. And at that point, I was pretty much hooked. I started watching like different YouTube videos. So I was watching like Crochet by Jenna, I think at the time, and a few others as well. And I was just like, I need to make more plushies. So at this point, I was like grinding out so many plushies. I got into the whole Premier Parfait buying thing. I was getting yarn from Michaels and I made so many plushies. And then at this point, my mom was like, you have way too many plushies. You need to start selling these. So that's when I decided, like, okay, do I actually start an Etsy shop? I had created one in the past for art things before and it did not go well. So I was very like, okay, how do I do this differently this time? And I think that the main difference is literally just the dedication. Like, if you actually put your mind to it and you're like, I want to sell, and you invest the time and energy, like, it will go better. And you just can't give up that easily, especially initially. So, moving on to part two of actually opening my Etsy shop. So in my Etsy shop, I spent probably a week or two really spending time on the Etsy shop. So I worked on a logo, I worked on the banner, I made a bunch of listings for different plushies that I already had. And I spent a lot of time on the pictures, the descriptions. I like really spent time on every single aspect of it to make it as good as I could, given the limited selling experience that I had, of course. And I really wanted to put that time in initially because I thought that's what would help me make sales. From there, I definitely had a waiting period of like, oh, like, am I ever going to get an order? I don't think so. And I was like waiting for a bit. And then I kind of had the idea of like kickstarting my store a little. So I had like friends and family purchase things from my store. A lot of the time, these were things that people did want from me. And instead of like just giving it to them how I normally would, I would ask them to do it through the store just so that my Etsy would start to get some traffic. So like my husband purchased some things, my parents purchased some things. You know how it goes. So I think that definitely helped and I started getting some orders. Let me actually see if I can pull up what like my first few orders were. Okay, I noticed that my mic was crackling, so hopefully it doesn't do that anymore. I'm guessing it's my hair, but we'll see. So I looked through, or I tried to look through some of my previous orders and also see the timeline a little. So I started my store, I want to say in like November of January 2023, and I think I didn't really like set it ready to like accept sales until Jan of 2024. And then I had a couple of sales from, Neil and then one of my mom's friends, and I think my mom as well. And then I started getting some sales from other people. I got a custom order, and then from there, it just kept going. Just to give you a couple numbers, I sold 4 items in Jan. I sold 4 items in February. Okay, and then yeah, March is when it really started. I sold 10 plus items in March. And I can see here that a lot of those were actually from, I think, one of my patterns. I had a pattern of Appa, like a small version of him. I don't have that on my store anymore due to like copyright issues with creating plushies of characters, but that pattern was doing really well. I was like pretty sad that I had to like take off that pattern because it was like my first pattern that was kind of doing well. So as you can see, by that point I was already creating patterns. The one thing I think to note is that I would say I was already a intermediate to advanced like amigurumi plushie creator by before I started my store because I'd already created so many items. So I wasn't really new. Like one of my first orders was a very, I would say, like slightly more complex like custom order without a pattern. So if you're still beginning, I would consider taking less custom orders and like focus on like selling items that you've already created just so that the customers know that they're going to get exactly what they're looking for. And I thought it'd be fun to go through some actual stats as well. So you see the numbers and you see whether this is something that's worth it for you. Just to keep in mind, These are all the sales I was getting, but at the same time, I personally probably could not do more than this because I have a full-time job and this is like a side hobby slash hustle for me. So in the first year, I made $6,552. I had 435 orders. So as you can tell, a lot of those are probably patterns. 263 of my jumbo sunflower turtle pattern. And then I sold 42 like actual sunflower turtles in a smaller size and then 15 in the jumbo. So those were kind of like my main orders. And then I sold 17 like custom plushies that year, and everything else was much below that in terms of numbers. And then in my second year selling on Etsy, I sold $10,531 worth of plushies and patterns. So definitely a solid improvement there. I started seeing that I could go towards like 1,000 a month. And that's something that I kind of have a goal for to maintain consistently. Like there are times in between those 2 years that I had to like close down my shop or reduce the number of items I was selling. So things that I would say I actively did to prevent selling more. So that's something that I wanted to keep in mind. And yeah, this year I sold 1,600 of that same jumbo sunflower turtle pattern. So as you can see, like if you have a pattern that does well, it does help you like consistently do better. And then I also now had the jumbo axolotl pattern and I sold 461 of those, as well as 33 of the small sunflower turtle plushies. And yeah, that's how I've been doing so far on Etsy. And then outside of Etsy, I've actually been selling in a couple of different areas. I did a couple of in-person markets over the years, and I've also done some like longer term orders with people. For example, I did a couple of orders with a company that wanted their logo made, and I made a pattern for them. I made several plushies, and that was actually a very money-wise lucrative deal. I wanted to talk a little bit about markets. And so I looked into it, I applied to a couple, and I finally got into my first one, which was in Berkeley. And I think the problem that I've mainly dealt with in the Bay Area is that doing markets here are very expensive. You will be spending around 300 to 500 on the fee, pretty much, at least the ones that I looked into. And it is not necessarily guaranteed that there's going to be a lot of crowd. So the first few that I did, I would say were like I did well in terms of how much I sold, but like just like objectively, but then given the cost of actually, having the place and any of the transport, all that stuff, definitely not worth it money wise, I would say. And I could have a whole other video going into the finances of markets if you're interested. But in this video, I want to keep it really short. So I'm just going to keep moving it along. But I finally started doing these night markets in SF, and those went really, really well for me. And I would still say percentage wise, I'm losing a high percentage of the price of each item towards the market. But I think it was worth it to sell some of the plushies that were in my inventory and to meet people. And it was just like such a great experience. And I would definitely do those again when I have time. But in the last year or so, I joined like a new job and it was definitely a lot busier. And I also got married this year. So I just have not had time to consider doing markets, but I definitely wanted to mention them. Okay, finally, we of course have to talk about marketing and social media. So I would say that this is a place where I'm the weakest. I don't think I'm very good at creating content. I don't think I'm really good at Reels or YouTube, like any of the things. Probably because my passion lies in crocheting and not so much in content creation. That's something to keep in mind is that I was able to build how much I built, which is obviously relatively small compared to other businesses, without really the help of social media. I'm pretty small on all my accounts. I think as of now, I'm around 3,000 followers on Instagram, 1,000 on TikTok, and 2,000 on YouTube. And so, yeah, as you can tell, like definitely a very, very small creator. And while I do think I get some traffic on my Etsy through my accounts, I definitely get most of it just through the natural Etsy traffic. So one thing that I do want to work on this year is that, which is why I'm like trying to be consistent with YouTube and see how that goes, because I do want to have my own shop and not just rely on Etsy and then get like my own organic traffic from my videos and my content. I do like posting videos of my plushies. I just, they just don't do well, so it's fine. But yeah. Okay, I want to briefly talk about some of the biggest challenges. Obviously, you're not going to know how many orders you're going to get until you start. So one thing is you're going to have to start, you're going to have to see how it goes and if it's something that you want to continue and how much effort and energy you want to invest in. Because I will say, I don't think that there's a strict formula that you can follow and you're just going to get sales. Everyone's style is different, everyone's tastes are different. And this something that you're going to have to find out is like, okay, do people like my work? Do they want to buy my work? And that's something that I'm still figuring out too, like which things do people want to purchase and which things do I need to work on? So that's definitely one thing to keep in mind. The other thing is crochet is a handmade, time-taking activity. No matter what, there's only so much I could possibly hand make and sell on my store, and I know that. So that's like why I would say like my goals for how much I want to sell, especially through plushies, is very, very limited because I know I can only crochet so much and I don't want to get like hand injuries or anything like that. So the only place really to grow is patterns. So that said, I would really, really invest time in learning how to write and sell patterns because I think that is the best in the sense of like bang for your buck a little bit, if that makes sense. And also the creative process, I just find to be so fun. So I definitely want to create more patterns this year. I think right now my pace is quite slow. I might have like around 12 to 15 patterns. I'm not really sure about the number, but yeah. And then also, you can reach burnout. There are periods of time where I've had a ton of sales. And then after crocheting all those things, I'm like, oh, do I even want to crochet another jumbo sunflower turtle? Probably not. So it's good to keep in mind that you are not a factory. Like you want to make things that you want to make because you are a human being with interests and this is a hobby and it's not like, it's not just about churning out products. So that's something I've had to keep in mind for myself. And I want to like keep making things that are fun for me to make, but that's not necessarily how things sell. Like I will just sell a bunch of sunflower turtles, but I don't want to make sunflower turtles for the rest of my life. So that's just another thing to keep in mind. Set goals accordingly to what you want to actually make, if that makes sense. Yeah, so I think my overall advice is to just get started. I think there is so much potential and it is just so fun to be able to share like my plushies with the world. And yeah, I definitely recommend that if you want to sell, like you should just start selling. I think Etsy personally for me was a great place to start, even though they do take a lot in fees. I definitely wouldn't have generated enough traffic without Etsy, so definitely grateful for that. And yeah, just like be creative, have fun with it. I would say don't worry sticking to like a niche or like type of plushie or anything like that. Just like have fun. Okay, I think that's gonna be it for this video. Thank you so much for listening all the way if you got till here. And I think I just went into very brief detail into each of these topics that probably could have each been its own video. So if you have any questions, definitely feel free to leave them in the comments below. And yeah, follow along if you're interested in more of these tips. I'm happy to make extra videos on any of these. And yeah, good luck.